right, everyone, welcome. If you're joining on the East Coast, it is lunchtime. I hope you are snacking away while you are learning. And for those of you on the West Coast, continue to chug that coffee. We have a very packed agenda the rest of the day today. I'm Kelsey. I am hosting the Impact Stage today. I would love for folks to share some hellos and where you are joining from in the chat. We have a really exciting session coming up. So I'm excited to introduce our next conversationist. We have Sarah Trioia, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Project Evident, where she partners with funders and practitioners to leverage AI for greater productivity and outcomes. She has experience as an investor, advisor, and leader, including roles at Health Leads, New Profit, and the Center for Effective Philanthropy. She focuses on helping nonprofits scale impact through innovation and change management. We also have Laila Brenner, who is the head of philanthropy at TalkingPoints, leading philanthropic revenue strategy and representing the organization's work externally, with 20 plus years of experience, including roles at Code for America, Habitat for Humanity, and the Trust for Public Land. She is passionate about using technology and AI to expand access and views fundraising as an act of love and invitation to create change. So Sarah and Laila are here to talk making the ask to grantmakers to support AI implementation. I think this is a very important and timely conversation for all of us as we have these conversations with our funders. So really excited to hear it. I'll be back on for some Q&A at the end. Over to you, Sarah and Laila.
Welcome, folks. It is such a pleasure to be here. I have to tell you, looking at the chat function and seeing the global reach of this conversation is just incredible. Laila and I are delighted to be here with you to talk to you a little bit about how to do fundraising for AI implementations. I'm going to start by just sharing a couple of slides up front, just to kind of get us all in the same place. So our goals for today are just, we want you to understand who's actually assessing the proposals at funding organizations. It may not be the program officer that you're talking to, how program officers assess AI proposals, and then most importantly, what actually works in raising money for AI. I'm Sarah Trioia, Chief Innovation Officer with Project Evident. Our mission is to help practitioners and funders use data more effectively to have better outcomes for your mission, for the individuals and the communities that they serve. Our concern is that evaluation and data has too long happened to nonprofits in particular, as opposed to by and for nonprofits. And so our goal is to really shift the power dynamic around how data and evidence is used. So about 4 years ago at Project Evident, we started our journey around AI and machine learning. At that time, we saw it as a real opportunity to change the way people were collecting data and analyzing data and decomplexing decision-making for frontline staff. And when we talked to funders about it, we heard, that's really interesting, but grantees, nonprofits, they're not really using AI right now. So we partnered with the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. We did one of the first surveys on AI interest in use for funders and for nonprofits. And there's just one piece of data I want you to take away from that report, which is you are using AI more frequently than your grant makers are. I'm not going to share any more data from that report, but I encourage you to look at it. It's about 2 years old now, but based on my talking with practitioners and with funders, it does not seem like some of the headline conclusions that we came to at that time have shifted. Certainly not this one. Grant makers are still behind nonprofits in terms of their AI use. So more recently, we did a research report on funding the future. We were really interested in talking to those foundations and in particular program officers who are actively funding AI grantee proposals. Importantly, these are not proposals that are about developing a white paper or developing a framework. We were really looking for folks who funded proposals that were around AI implementation to get to mission enhancement for a nonprofit. We did a ton of work trying to find program officers and foundations and grant makers who've been engaged in this work. We were ultimately able to find 41. I will tell you that those 41 represent the largest and the most well-endowed grant makers in the US. and that we ended up surveying about 34 and interviewing about 20. There wasn't a perfect overlap on that. So ultimately, it's 41 institutions that this information represents. So one of the questions that we asked them, because we knew it was so important in the due diligence process, was just how comfortable were people really assessing the technical feasibility of AI implementation? And it's not great. About only 36%, just over a third of the program officers that we surveyed, feel really confident in their ability to assess the technical impacts of a grantee proposal that includes AI. So, what this means is that the person that you're pitching may not feel comfortable truly doing that assessment, the technical assessment of what you're offering them. So, how do they solve for that problem? They collaborate, not surprisingly. About 60% do internal collaboration, and about almost 70% do external collaboration. In terms of what this actually looks like based on our interviews, certainly for corporate based funders, that internal collaboration might be I'm going to go talk to the engineers. We have a massive engineering department. It may also be just inside of a grant maker. I'm going to talk to our director of technology. On the external collaboration, this is anything from, well, we have pretty good relationships with folks on our board who sit at large technology companies. We're just going to ask them, to something that looks a little more formalized, like with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, where they've created a panel of consultant experts that any of their program officers can can reach out to and consult with if they have questions about the technical feasibility. But what this really means for you is even though you typically have a one-to-one relationship with a program officer when you're pitching, when it comes to technical impacts, that person who's doing the assessment may not actually sit in the room. Now, in terms of what matters to folks, we gave them a choice. They could choose up to three of a set of elements that could be important when you're assessing technical feasibility. And what's really interesting about this data is the shape of the chart, that 85 and 82% are in fairly good alignment in terms of what matters in assessing technical impacts. It's, is AI actually the best solution? There's a lot of concern about AI being a shiny object, that they're just going to get proposals to use AI. It's not actually the best way to solve the problem that's being surfaced in the proposal. And then just concerns about a grantee's technical capabilities to be able to execute the proposal. What's interesting, if you look at the other elements that we asked about, which really go more towards sustainability. So it's around costs, availability of data, change management. Those issues were less present, at least when we were surveying folks in terms of what mattered. Where people were really focused, if you think about, is AI the best solution for the problem, or is it an AI shaped problem, we sometimes say, or grantees' technical capabilities, that's almost like the first step, right? The first step that you would take if you were going to implement AI. The more sustainable things you have to do were less of a concern in terms of assessing technical feasibility. We also asked about their level of confidence for ethical impacts, and here it's slightly better. So about 50% versus 36% are confident in being able to assess ethical impacts. Now, of course, this sounds like great news, right? They're more confident on this. Here's our concern based on the interviews that we did. Most often, when we talk to people about their confidence level in assessing ethical impacts, what they said is, I'm confident because we've always grant funded against a social justice framework. We've always had a set of norms and values about equity inside of our organization. And this is great, by the way. Like there's no, I mean, we want every funder to be doing that. However, AI and implementing AI creates some nuanced concerns and technical concerns around how bias could be hardened or bias be spread. And our concerns is if your social justice framework or the other rubric that you might be using to assess ethical impacts doesn't take into account the technical ways that AI can actually expand bias or harden bias, we're worried that maybe people are feeling overconfident. And in fact, when we asked a similar set of questions about what matters to you for top considerations for ethical impact, you'll see that the responses are much more dispersed. So this sort of reinforces the idea that people are using kind of their own special snowflake, um, social justice framework or equity rubric, and that what matters to foundations is a little bit all over the map in terms of assessing ethical impacts. That's a lot harder, we think, for practitioners like yourselves, because there's not a clear set of things that really matter. So we were very fortunate when we were doing this work is that 6 of the organizations that we interviewed had fully built out AI grant making rubrics. So what is the due diligence criteria? What are the questions that they're asking if a proposal comes to them and it includes AI implementation? So we took those 6 rubrics, we looked for patterns against it, and then we created a generalized AI grant making rubric to serve as like a baseline for funders who are interested in beginning to engage in due diligence and really consider proposals in this area. I think importantly for this particular rubric, which is within the report, or you can just get it as a pullout, is it's not only the questions you're most likely to be asked in these areas, it's also what good answers look like. What is the assessment they're doing on the other side? At a very high level, the problem definition and intended impact. Again, this is it an AI shaped problem? What is the outcome that you're hoping to achieve by integrating AI? Power and safety and fairness. Power is really about whose data is being used in the application and who is being consulted in the application design. Safety and fairness is around the risk mitigations that you are putting in place to make sure that your AI isn't drifting, and that you're not replicating bias that might exist in the data. Application design and data, again, data sovereignty, who's giving permission for the data that you're using? Do you have ongoing access to the data that you need? That application design around stakeholder engagement, whose voice is being considered in terms of how you're using AI and how you're designing your implementation. And then finally, the actual implementation, including talent and cost. So you'll note that some of the things that I said in our interviews, generally in our survey, folks do not care as much about. When we pulled those investment rubrics from 6 foundations that are actively and with some great frequency engaging in AI grant making, those items came up more frequently in terms of looking at sustainability and looking at engagement from the communities that you serve in your AI design. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and get to the good stuff. I have the real pleasure of getting to speak with Laila. Laila, we've had the pleasure of working with each other and getting to know each other over the last year and a half. I'm so blown away by your career and sort of how you've come and really been a pioneer around fundraising for technology and now fundraising for AI. Would you share with folks how you got here?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Laila Brenner, head of philanthropy at TalkingPoints, as Sarah mentioned. So, yeah, fundraising was an intentional choice for me. I came into this career through a failure. I had the opportunity to start a nonprofit with a wealthy individual, bringing computer technology to Latin America. And that individual said, "Hey, I still want to do this, but actually, I can't pay for all of it." And it was at that moment, really early in my career, that I realized you can't accomplish social change unless you can raise the money to do it. So I decided I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to start being a generalist, and I have been really lucky to find myself at some incredible organizations over the past 20 years, using technology to really deliver impact at scale.
Laila, you've been at this longer than most. I know for many people, thinking about raising money for AI implementation is brand new, but you've been raising money for technology for a bit. How has the technology fundraising landscape changed? And do you see an increase in the number of grant makers who are willing to fund AI or machine learning?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a really incredible shift in the philanthropy landscape, I would say, over the past 10 to 15 years. When I started, it was a lot of big foundations with founders who are no longer with us, the Fords and the MacArthurs of the world. And that has really shifted to a landscape of a lot of wealth and philanthropy coming from individuals who have started or worked at technology companies,
Yeah.
which has really shifted what people pay attention to and what they care about. And so
Mhm.
having this new sort of like era of philanthropy where you have founders who really understand technology and the power that it can bring, has completely shifted the landscape. And I'll share a little fun anecdote that actually one of our board members shared with me that kind of blew my mind. He said, funders care about four things these days: AI, 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 and democracy. And he said, and if you look really closely, it's all of the foundations with dead founders who care about democracy, and all of the foundations with living founders who are completely focused on the power of AI for transformation. So I just
Right.
thought that was fascinating.
So given that there are some funders out there that care about AI and that you've spent a portion of your career really focused on funding technology, is there a pattern among the funders who support you in terms of their interests, their backgrounds, how they operate? I mean, you talked a little bit about like overall, we have more foundations out there with living donors where their money was actually made from technology as opposed to something else that was a more maybe a manufacturing, or other ways that wealth was created in the prior century.
Yeah, I mean, this probably won't be surprising, but a lot of these donors and philanthropists have either come out of Silicon Valley or some of the really large technology companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's a pattern in that they all really do want to give back and create equity. Some of these companies have gone on to do really interesting things, and it's not always been delivering equity.
Mhm.
Among everyone. So I think, founders who really see the potential of technology to do that and to do that at scale in a way that really unlocks the potential of humankind.
Mhm. So one of the things that we saw in the research that we did with the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, and again, this research is now a year and change old, but we asked grant makers at that point whether or not they would create specific funding areas for AI or for technology, or would they just fund across the portfolio and everybody would fund technology. At that point, a year and a half ago, folks said, we're not going to create a group that's focused on AI or technology. It's just going to happen within our other thematic program areas. Laila, how does that check out with what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix of both right now. You see foundations like the Gates Foundation, for example.
Mhm.
And they have really intentionally decided to make AI a piece of every portfolio and every piece of their strategy, particularly
Mhm.
in the education in the US landscape. And then you see other organizations and foundations who have really decided to double down on AI.
Mhm.
Um, Many, you hear from program officers will say, unless you have AI somewhere in the work that you're doing or your application, like we just can't bring this to our board or our principal. So I
Mhm.
think it's shifting in a way that this really is what almost all of the major philanthropists are focused on is how do we understand this
Mhm.
new technology and how do we unleash it to really, really create social impact?
Okay, so this leads me to my next question, which is I think one of the real challenges that has been faced in the past is that folks look at technology as if it's part of overhead, right? And we won't go down the rabbit hole of what it means to have overhead ratios and how unrealistic that is relative to the way the rest of the economy works. But the idea that technology would be overhead as a part of program. And clearly for talking points, AI and technology is the program. Like it is inexorably linked in terms of how it operates. So, where do you, in your journeys, talking to different funders, what is sort of the continuum that you hear around how they're assessing that investment? Are they seeing it as an overhead? Are they seeing it as program? What are you encountering?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, don't get me started on overhead ratios because the number of funders who say you can only have 10%, you can only have
Mhm.
15%, and there are funders out there who say you can have 0%. So I don't know how they
Right.
expect this work is going to happen without operating the business. But I would say we have definitely transitioned in the funders
Mhm.
who really understand technology and have worked at technology companies. They get that this is a part of your organization. If you are running a
Right.
digital platform like we are at Talking Points, all of the technology is the program. It's the talent that goes into that. It's the tech stack that you have to use. Like all of those expenses are an important part of it. And I think something that nonprofits can become more sophisticated in is how they build their budgets. So we all know
Mm,
that budgets are a statement of your values, and really how the work gets done. And I think if you're putting, so much of your important talent and your tech stack into your overhead ratio, you're not really serving yourself.
mhm,
These are expenses that are directly leading to impact, and you have to pay your people and you have to pay your vendors in order to get this work done. So make sure that
mm,
you're really budgeting this in a transparent and smart way.
yeah. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues who I think is in the chat function to link. We have a case study that we recently released on crisis text line, which is about how do you sustainably fund AI impact at scale, and you just how do you think about what those ongoing investments look like? Laila, so that's a great read for folks who want some more detail around what that looks like, based in a story about a single organization. So, which leads me to, one of the things that I shared with the group when we were looking at that tight concentration in terms of what matters to funders when they are evaluating a proposal that includes AI. It was that AI shaped problem. It was, do you have the technology to be able to, at least do the first build? Some of the other things that were on that list around sustainability just didn't show up, everything from the data to the dollars. So I'm interested in the like, we don't have a great history in our sector, by the way, of funders funding ongoing technology. We have a lot of kind of one and done investment, and there's some great data out there. That's actually in the Crisis Text Line report. If you want to look at it, just at the history of philanthropy and sort of how we have really underfunded technology in the past. So I'm interested in the like, you've been at this for a while. Have you seen any changes in terms of folks understanding that technology is not a one and done investment, that it really requires ongoing maintenance? Certainly, AI requires ongoing maintenance. Where is the state of philanthropy, and what are the good arguments that you make with funders around why sustainability is important?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a great question. And I think there are really two sides to this coin.
Yeah.
So, as I really focus on large transformational investments from funders, and I found that just like in grassroots fundraising, when you're trying to get someone to give you 50 or $100, or you're trying to
Mhm.
get someone to give you $10 million, it costs a lot more in terms of resources and time to acquire that donor than it does to retain them.
Mhm.
So I think just knowing that right up front that it's going to take a lot of time and it's a long process. But once you have someone truly invested in your work, if you do a great job of stewardship, which by the way is one of the
Right?
most important things that we do in fundraising, um, it's easier to keep that funder because they're invested in the change and the progress that you're making. Now,
Mm.
I said there were two sides to this coin, and the other side is that because we have gone through this, sort of shift and are in a new era of philanthropy, having a financial sustainability plan is one of the most important things that you can have. So funders will stay with you and they also want to know, what is your plan so you don't need my money in the long term? How will you be? What is your exit plan? How will you sustain this work over time? And whether that's we're going to solve the problem in 20 years, so we won't be needed, or
Mm.
government should be funding this, so we have a path to state or federal funding, or we have an earned revenue strategy. And so that I think is really important when thinking about sustainability and building long-term plans with funders, because they want to know,
Mm.
how long is it going to take you to get to the point where this can be self-sustaining
Right.
work, without my help?
Right. So at Project Evident, we also raise money for activities that include AI. And we have begun in those investments to include multi-years of just sustainable funding on the back end. So, yep, this is the build, but here's the off ramp that we need to be able to find additional supporters to be able to help us in the sustainability. Thus far, we've had, and it's a small universe of folks that we're talking to. People have been receptive, but I'm interested in Layla. Like, do you find people receptive when you're saying, like, okay, you want to fund the X, but we also got to fund the pipes. Like, we also have to fund the tech debt. We actually have to fund the fact that the APIs are breaking. We have to fund R&D, which is something that
Mhm.
you rarely see on somebody's profit and loss statement in the nonprofit sector. But it's so, I mean, one could argue that it's always been necessary. Certainly in technology, innovation and R&D is necessary. What like what is your experience in, I got to fund the tech debt and I've got to fund research and development? Have you found any arguments that work to help people make the translation of like, oh yes, this is a basic investment that everybody on the other side of the economy is always doing. We need to do that here too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun. I joined Talking Points about 2 years ago, and we have a formal R&D arm here. We call it our solution incubator. And it's been really fun actually to raise money for that R&D because I'd say not all, but many of the funders that we work with do truly understand the cycle of building technology and tools, and that you have to
Mm,
start small, you have to experiment, you have to be getting those feedback loops from community, you have to be co-designing with the people that you're trying to serve.
mhm,
So they really do understand that this is a core part of the work. I'll also say in those funders who like really get it, the more you're transparent with them about your tech debt, about the challenges you
mm,
face, the more they trust you. And this is a
mm,
trust-based industry. So it's just absolutely critical that you never go into a conversation or a proposal or a funder report and it's all rainbows and sunshine. You have to be
mm,
honest about the challenges that you're facing because those are the challenges that they want you to tackle. I will say, just like, in the last question, having two sides to this coin, there are also funders who are really focused on like very specific activities and outcomes, which can be
mm,
really hard to fundraise in an R&D environment because you don't know
mm.
what you're going to land on.
Yeah.
You may fail, and actually failing sometimes is the most important thing that you can do because you go out and you try things and you find out what works and what doesn't work. So sometimes um, we found ourselves having to educate the funder on that journey and
Yeah.
the importance of failure.
So that's actually a great segue to my next question, which is like, what has been your experience with a funder who really understood, right? So part of what you're doing is highlighting like, this is what good looks like. So, like, how do they show up? What questions are they asking you? How do you know it's going to be a good meeting? Because they clearly have done their homework.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. I have a couple of funders who I won't name, who
Mhm,
are my favorites. They're all our favorites, but you really
mhm,
do have
mhm,
some funders who are your favorites, and they really show up with a sense of, I would say, empathy and curiosity. They've already bought in to the fact that technology is a complete game changer, that that's the inflection point where we can really achieve impact at scale. So when they show up with really honest questions about what problem are you trying to solve? What technology are you using to do that? Like I said, where are your biggest challenges? They
mhm,
wanna know about your failures. They wanna know what has and hasn't worked. They also wanna know that you have an understanding of the ecosystem. Who
mhm,
else is trying to solve this problem? What other approaches are we bringing to the table? And how do you specifically fit into that? So I think
mhm,
they come to the conversations, all funders come with an impact lens. What change in the world, are we going to
mhm,
accomplish? But funders who really get it also come to it with a lens of, okay, how are we gonna get there? What do you need?
mhm.
What are the biggest challenges that you're gonna face? And then I would say, then they'll ask about your business model because technology-minded funders are also business
Yep,
people. So they wanna know about
right,
that. So make sure you're prepared to
right.
speak to your business model.
So we had touched at the very beginning of this conversation, or I'd showed some data around like ethical impacts. Like, okay, ethical impacts. Obviously, actually, we know from the work that we did with Stanford that the biggest barrier to AI adoption for grant makers and for grantees for nonprofits is concerns around bias. Like that is the number one blocker. And we know concerns around bias in AI are absolutely real, as are concerns around bias in life, absolutely real, and that there are particular ways that AI can interact with bias. So I'm interested in, do you get questions to try and assess the ethical impacts of your work? And what do those questions look like?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I think it's really interesting because we're all in this space together, right? Where we're
Yeah,
figuring it out. We know
yeah,
there are inherent dangers and harm that
mm,
AI can, and bias that AI
mhm,
can perpetuate. But when funders are really asking about it, they want to know, how are you building, right?
yeah,
Are you trying to break things? Are
Mhm.
you trying to get AI to deliver the worst case scenario so that you
Mhm.
then know how to present it? Like
Mhm.
I said before, you don't want to go in with it's all rainbows and sunshine and
Mhm.
everything is coming out well. It's like, what is the work that you're taking? And I'll also add, I mean, it feels like every other week now there's a new
Mhm.
AI ethical framework coming out. And so
Yes.
I think we're coming to a point where there are some real tangible tools out there,
Mhm.
like Digital Promise, for example, has
Mhm.
the the AI like responsibly built product
Mhm.
certification. Um, you need to have a really strong stance on what are the steps that you're taking to make sure that you are number one, like fully
Mhm.
aware of the harm
Right.
that can be perpetuated, and number two, like how are you preventing that?
Yeah. So, uh, given what we learned about the technical, like the sort of the maybe I'll say the sort of wobbliness of understanding the technical impacts and confidence of program officers possibly in assessing the technical impacts of the work. Do you bring technical folks into the room? Like when I think about the way I've pitched opportunities in the past, like I love to have my frontline staff. I love to have like the team that is really in the weeds on any given project, giving voice to the work. Do you do that with your technical folks? Do you not do that? Like how given this kind of current state of technical understanding among philanthropy, kind of how do you think about how you deploy and recognize there's an opportunity cost in deploying folks into fundraising versus doing their day jobs? No, all of our jobs is fundraising. How do you think about the other people that you might bring into the room?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, we all know like some of our best fundraising assets are our
Right.
colleagues and the people who are
Yeah.
doing this work. So definitely leverage those folks. And I think I absolutely bring in our technical folks to conversations at the
Mm.
right point.
Oh.
Because it's really you have to remember, and I'm stealing this from another fundraising consultant,
Mm.
but there's that 30,000, 15,000, and 2-foot view. Our attention spans are getting much smaller, right?
Yeah.
As time goes on. And so you have to be able to really articulate your work at that 30,000-foot view. Then a funder is going to want to jump into the 15,000-foot view, which is a
Mhm.
fundraiser and program staff you can handle. But when they want to get into the 2-foot view, that's when you bring your technical person on. And
Mhm.
very often for us, it's one of the final due diligence steps. I want to speak with your
Mhm.
head of product. I want to speak with your
Mhm.
head of engineer, and it's partially about understanding the technology, but it's
Mhm.
also about confidence in the people doing
Yeah.
the work and in your leadership team.
That's right. That's right. So we know from the AI investment rubric, that shared piece that's at the back of the fundraising doc, of the Funding the Future report, that your talent and your ability to execute on this is something that folks want to evaluate. And so that doesn't surprise me that they want to meet the technology folks, ultimately when they're ready for that 2-foot view. So again, Layla, you've been doing this work for a while. How do you keep your skills sharp? How do you stay on top of trends? Because we keep referring to this at Project Evident as the all teach, all learn moment, that we are literally inventing how we're going to fund AI, how we're going to use AI for mission enhancement, how AI can drive scalable impact. All of this stuff we're doing right now. So given that the market's evolving, as is the ability to fundraise against it, that market's evolving too. How do you stay sharp?
Yeah, yeah, this is another great question. I think um, one, it's really important for you as a fundraiser to really
Mhm.
deeply understand how your organization is using technology and or
Mhm.
experimenting with AI to drive impact. Um, and so then it's also really important to understand how other nonprofits are doing that. And then I'll say one of the best ways for all of us to learn together is really embarking on the journey of using AI yourself. How are we
Yeah.
using AI as fundraising professionals? What are the things that we're learning that we're unlocking?
Mhm.
Um, that's one of the best ways. And then it's there are so many great resources out there. I mean, fun this conference in and of itself and just really making sure that you're out there and you're learning with others because like I said, we're
Mhm.
all in this beautiful moment together where um, no one knows any more than anyone else and
Yeah.
everything's going to change tomorrow. So just make sure you're part of all of the AI communities and that you're
Mhm.
learning and that you're really trying it yourself.
So I asked you earlier about what does it look like when like the relationship with the funder is really singing. And again, we're not naming any names here, but I'm also interested in what does it look like when you're with a funder who really it's not singing. It's a little discordant. Again, this is a new area of grant making for many program officers. What does it look like? And are there any tip saves that you recommend for people to try and write a meeting that maybe is going a little bit sideways?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all know how important the research is. So show up to
Yeah.
these meetings like knowing what that funder really cares about. Um, we have found ourselves in conversations where it's not just that the funder doesn't understand AI, they actually have a bias against AI. There's a lot of
Mm,
skepticism. Some funders are like, oh, you're just coming to talk to me about AI because you think all funders care about AI, right? They're like,
mhm,
is this real? Is there anything there? And that's the really important point where you have to go back to your program and your mission. AI
mhm.
is just a tool. It's just a
Yeah.
means to get to the end of delivering impact. So always make sure that you're really clear about that. And we've been able to turn conversations around by saying, look, for us, it's really about the families and the students and the educators that we're serving. We now have tools that allow us to do that at scale in a
Mhm,
personalized, customized way that wasn't possible, even 2 years ago. So how are
mhm,
we making sure that we are taking advantage of all of the best tools that we have to deliver that impact?
mhm.
And then there will be funders who will continue to be skeptical, about this, and you just have to either try to win them over or decide when it's time to move on.
Right. So one of the things, Layla, you and I have talked about is how a program logic model or a theory of change ultimately informs your technology roadmap. And for I think for the best of organizations that we've had the pleasure of working with, including Talking Points and looking at, we see that connection there. Can you talk a little bit about how you bring your theory of change into the funding conversations when you're also talking about AI? Like, how are you bridging that sort of core tool about what's the change we want to see in the world and what we're doing to make that happen with the fact that you also have a technology roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, we always start with the end of the theory of change.
Yeah.
Where are we trying to get to? Who are we trying to serve? And what is the best way to do that? And then that is when you overlay the product roadmap onto that. Is it building a tool that allows, for example, teachers to craft more research-based messages? That's
Mhm,
because we want to make sure that educators, teachers, and parents are having the most productive conversations and interactions that they can. So it's really about tying it back to the purpose and the reason, for why you exist as an organization, and then why implement a certain piece of technology or a certain tool.
mhm. So you spoke earlier about the fact that you have your own codified R&D team, that like innovation is something that you talk about and that you specifically fundraise for. You're not kind of trying to eke it out off of the side of sort of general operating support. But you also gave voice to the fact that, like, actually, we're learning a whole bunch of stuff, and failure is really important. And we have tech debt on the core product side. I mean, just all the realities of being essentially a technology company. So I'm interested in the like we've talked about the budgeting for this work, but what does it really look like for I think I've just lost my questions. I'm going to come back to that question in a second. And I'm going to ask you about the pros and cons in being in an accelerator. So, one of the first ways that we saw technology investment happening was large technology companies offering AI accelerators, which you guys have had the pleasure of being a part of. But you also have dollars that come directly from funders. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of what it looks like to be inside of an AI accelerator versus what it looks like just to be getting direct funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think accelerators are fantastic. There are a lot of them out there, so I would say be really judicious about the ones that you do want to be a part of, because you can find yourself spending a lot of resources if you start to chase them all. And I think being in an accelerator, particularly at a certain stage of technology development, is so
Mm,
incredibly helpful because you're learning alongside others. If it's supported by a company like Google, for example, then you're going to get some really incredible resources, feedback, advice that you wouldn't normally access. Uh, I will also say that if the accelerator comes with the direct funding, that's the perfect match in heaven because you can't do the work without the funding. Um, and, like I said before, sometimes accelerators at the wrong stage of technology development can be a distraction. So you
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's the right accelerator at the right time for you. And also know that one of the biggest benefits of being an accelerator is the community of organizations that you become connected with because we're like I said, we're all learning together, but the most powerful thing we can do is learn from one another and be really aware of what is going on in your own ecosystem and the landscape and making sure that
Mhm.
you're a really productive piece of that.
Right. So the question I want to circle back to is general operating versus program related expenses, because you earlier had said like, things are moving quickly. It's hard to actually know exactly how I want to spend these dollars because literally like models are being changed over and new point solutions are suddenly available. And the thing that you are working on now can be done, by a point solution versus having to be custom coded, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you make the case? First of all, do you make the case for general operating versus program? And if you do, how are you making that case?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all know that general operating support is like the mecca of funding. That's what everyone
Right.
wants. And we want a funder to say, and so many have transitioned to this, that we trust you, we believe in your work, and we believe you know where the best place to
Hmm.
spend the resources are. That is not always the case with some
Hmm.
funders. And so when you're trying to get things like R&D funded, it's really important to have a framework that says, we don't know where we're going to end up at the end of this road. These are our goals. This
Hmm.
is the impact we want to have. This is what we want to accomplish. But the journey of getting there is what you need to articulate. How many folks are working on your R&D team? How many
Hmm.
experiments are they doing? How many A/B tests do you plan on running? Like these are
Hmm.
the types of metrics you can set versus I will serve X people with a tool that does
Yeah.
Y because you just don't know that you're going to land there. And
Hmm.
then I'll say as a fundraiser, it's really important to just stay in really close contact with your R&D team. So you're getting all those stories. They work so fast. They're often working in 1-2 week sprints, and you want to make sure that
Hmm.
you understand what's landing, what are your challenges, where are you failing, because those are
Hmm.
the stories that deepen that trust with your funder.
Hmm. So, Layla, we are almost out of time on our sort of official impact platform here, but we'll be moving over to the lounge in a moment for folks to join us if they have any just one-to-one questions that they have for either of us. But Layla, I'd like to end with, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you? What is the thing as a dyed-in-the-wool fundraiser that you want folks to know about how to raise money for AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want folks to know that you're not alone and you shouldn't try
Mhm.
to figure this out alone. There are conferences like this, but connect with your peers. One of the most powerful thing I've done in my career is build a huge network of fundraising peers. And we
Mhm.
come together and we don't just exchange intel about funders, although that's a big part of it. Like we
Mhm.
talk about how we raise money for this work, what's landing, what's not landing. So I would just say make sure that you're not on an island by yourself, and
Mhm.
that you're really leveraging this amazing community of fundraisers that we have.
Beautiful. I would also offer in the Funding the Future report at the back end, there is anonymous, but we have about a page and a half of voices of development leads raising money for AI powered nonprofits. And so if you're looking for some immediate gratification of feeling like I'm not alone, there are 5 voices in that overview that you can read and know that, oh, maybe some of the things you're experiencing, you're not just experiencing by yourself. Layla, thank you so much for joining me. I'm delighted to be able to be in the lounge with you in a couple of minutes. Everyone, thank you. Best of luck in all of your individual work to scope a strong AI-shaped problem and then raise money for that problem. I will just close by saying the for-profit sector has had almost 60 years to experiment with how machine learning and AI and now generative AI drives economic value. We are just getting started around how all of those tools can actually drive social value. But we can't do it without dollars. So everybody in this room raising money to be able to do those experiments and help move us forward as a community, as a sector, for how AI can really help shape mission related work and scale impact is just a huge gift. So Thank you so much for the work that you do every day. And we hope that we'll see a number of you in the lounge. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah and Laila. Thank you so much. I know I learned a lot personally, and there were some fantastic questions that were raised in the Q&A. So if you want to keep the conversation going with Sarah and Laila, please join them. I saw some really great questions from Jay and from Nicole wanting to keep the conversation going. So please join them in the lounge. And also, if you have feedback for Sarah or for Laila, please share your feedback. You can scan this, you can share it immediately. All of that goes to the team to help make the summit better year over year. And then if you're looking to join Laila and Sarah for their Q&A, you can join their lounge. From the reception area, you'll see a lounge in the top navigation. Select that, and then you can find the table with their lounge title, which is right here on the screen. Instructions for how to do that are right here up on the screen. So I know there were some really great questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to them. So please join them and keep the conversation moving. We've had a couple questions. I saw these come up in the Q&A, and I tried to answer as many as possible, but you are getting the recording. So as an attendee, you will get exclusive access to all 63 session recordings. Right after the event, you can log in with your AirMeet credentials and watch the replays. And then it will be up on the Fundraising AI Summit website in about 4 weeks for full access. We are really excited about the opportunity to provide you those resources, and presentations will also be available. Next up, we want to make sure you all are aware of Summit Plus. The biggest question that we hear generally at the end of the summit is, what do I do tomorrow? What do I do Wednesday? So this is why we created Summit Plus. After joining the summit, you can access this 3-week AI immersion and choose between leadership or capability tracks, or if you're looking just to test the water, you can invest in an AI Sparks annual pass to get started. This is stacked with resources. It's usually a $5,000 value, but summit attendees get it for $665 until September 16th. Seats are limited, so please reserve your spot as soon as possible. And we have a really fun engagement challenge going on throughout the day today. So the more that you are engaging throughout the summit, sharing your questions, engaging in the chat, joining lounges, responding to polls, the more you will see your name climb the leaderboard for this challenge. Top scores will win prizes like free lunch, coffee, and books from some of our incredible speakers. These are all designed to help you keep learning and amplifying your impact. So it pays to engage, and we hope you will enjoy having fun with that challenge. I also want to give some love to our sponsors. So all of these names and these companies that you see up on the screen, they help make the Fundraising AI Summit possible. Because of their support, this experience is completely free to all of us to attend. And the recordings, the resources, the content are free to access after. It's not possible without all of their support. Be sure to visit their sponsor booths. Those are located in the top navigation area. You can explore the tools, the tech, and the partnerships to help you adopt AI responsibly and take your learning to the next level, or have just like a really great conversation with one of these amazing sponsors. I want to give some love to a couple in particular. One Cause offers powerful fundraising solutions to help nonprofits amplify their message, engage new donors, and raise more funds. Their digital fundraising platform includes online giving, mobile bidding, streaming events, event management, peer-to-peer fundraising, etc. And I believe we have a video for you to share a little bit more about One Cause. just for the Fundraising AI Summit, registrants can get a One Cause's free copy to the 2025 Fundraising Outlook Report. You can learn the latest nonprofit trends and strategies for success, so you can download your copy. That information is right there on the screen. And make sure you attend Steve from One Cause's session live tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern. You'll be entered to win a ticket to the 2026 RAISE conference, which is One Cause's conference. All right, and let's hear a little bit more about Stratus Live. So Stratus Live provides AI-powered nonprofit software that unifies donor management, digital engagement, and corporate giving. They help organizations deepen relationships, streamline their operations, and amplify their missions with intelligent, easy-to-use technology. You can get a custom demo of Stratus Live's nonprofit platform to learn how it can streamline fundraising and increase donor engagement. Stratus Live is also offering a free ebook for you. You can learn more about AI and in the nonprofit space in their AI starter kit. It's a comprehensive ebook. It's the perfect stepping stone for your journey into understanding how AI works for your organization. So that's now available to download. All right, and we are coming to another keynote in our agenda. So the innovation and impact stages will be closed for a little bit, and you can join our keynote happening on the Amplify stage, AI at the Crossroads, Trust, Governance, and Human Impact with Dr. Ruman Chaudhry and Nathan Chappell. It's going to be a really fantastic conversation. I encourage you to join them in the Amplify stage. Head on over there, just click on schedule in the upper right corner. You will see all of the sessions and the lounges, and you can make your way over to that stage. The impact stage will be closed during the duration of the keynote. So I will see you back on the impact stage following the keynote in about 30 minutes. All right, enjoy.